Hello guys, welcome to the basic braid tutorial. Just a casual little tutorial for you today. This one was a little bit spur of the moment. It wasn't, if any of you guys remember from the poll, it wasn't actually listed in the poll. And that's because someone just mentioned in Discord that, oh, it would be cool if we had a braid tutorial. So let's go over how I go about drawing a basic braid. The thing about braids is that they take a lot more brain power to really comprehend than you would think. There's a million and one tutorials out there on how to draw a braid and all kinds of tricks you can use, and they're all, legitimate tricks, and I've tried scraping by with some of those tips and tricks before. I think there's one that's like, oh, and draw zigzag and this and, all of that kind of nonsense. The problem I found with just following a tutorial or a method that is just kind of a hack to drawing a braid with like a zigzag or, just any like step-by-step hack is that I would only be able to draw one braid. And there's a lot of types of braids out there, but I would only ever be able to draw either like a really tight, perfect braid or, whatever the hack lent itself to. I couldn't like vary it up. And because I wasn't fully understanding what was happening, sometimes my braids just wouldn't look right, So the only thing that really helped me understand how to properly draw a braid, and we're just doing the basic braid for this one. There's a lot of types of braids out there. This one we're just going to cover a basic braid. But the thing that really helped me to be able to draw braids is literally understanding them. It can be very helpful if you have long hair or if you have some just pieces of string to actually practice doing a simple braid to fully comprehend what's going on in 3D space. Because what I have to think about while I'm drawing a braid is literally how the hair wraps around the braid. So let's just kind of analyze this drawing for a second before we get into actually drawing a new braid and showing you how to do this. So what's happening is that a piece of hair is coming from the outside around and tucking down under. As this other piece of hair comes around from the outside, same thing, in front of this piece of hair, and then it tucks under this other piece of hair that's doing the same thing. So coming from out and around, down, tucking in, out, around, down, tucking in, out, around, down, whoopsies, tucking in. I don't know if you guys can hear Mochi, he's kind of noisy in the background. Out, around, down, tucking in, out, around, down, tucking in, tucking in there, out, around, down, tucking in. And remember, this piece of hair, I'm saying coming from the outside, but it's actually coming from behind. So behind and then into the front. You see? Coming from behind into the front and tucking in. From behind, tucking in. Behind, tucking in. And it's just repeating itself all the way down. Of course, the interesting thing about braids is they can be really tight or they can be really loose, but they're all basically doing this. But depending on how the braid is, how tight or loose it is, each of these chunks can be different size. But in general, the chunks will get smaller as you go down because you're working with less and less hair. Split ends and whatnot. And then to finish it off, just tying it simple with a little elastic. Okay, so I hope that this kind of at least on a conceptual level, helps you understand that it's very important with the braid. The hair is coming from behind and around and then tucking in the front. Behind, around, tucking in the front. Okay, let's draw a braid, and I will, the way I usually start out is first I do whatever kind of shape or overall sweeping motion I want. Because usually when I draw hair, often it's like blowing in the wind, or, I mean, it's very rare that I will draw hair just hanging straight down the back, even though that is more realistic when it comes to braids, because braids are actually very heavy. If you have ever had a braid before, you will know that braids have quite a bit of weight. But to make art dynamic and whatnot, I like to do kind of swoopy, so we'll just give it at least a little bit of movement going on with our braid sample. And then starting out bigger at the top and then getting smaller as you go down. And I'll try and stick to, you know, this overall shape, but we may vary it a bit. Okay, so to start out the braid, first we need to choose which side we're going to start out with. I always have a tendency to start out with the left side. I'm not sure why I do this, but I do. So that means that it's going to be up a little bit higher than the right side. And so I start off by exactly that thing, thinking coming from the hair is coming from the outside and tucking in. Okay? So outside, tucking in. And then I have to think of the other piece of hair. It is also coming from the outside, but it might be a little bit lower since it's coming in second. So coming from the outside. And then also I am thinking this piece of hair needs to tuck into another piece of hair. So we need to remember to do that with this piece that's coming from the right. So this piece of hair is tucking into this piece of hair. Like this. Okay. And now this piece of hair that's coming this way needs to tuck into a piece of hair. So we will repeat with this side, coming from the back of the braid around. Now it's coming to the front of the braid. And this piece of hair is also coming from the back to the front, so that this piece of hair can tuck underneath. Again, on this side, this piece of hair coming from the back around to the front, and this piece of hair needs to tuck under. And so it's basically repeating this and trying to keep on the front of my mind of what is happening, so I don't get too confused with what's going on with this braid. So remembering coming from the back around to the front, tucking under, from the back around to the front, so it's just very important to just kind of visualize these pieces of hair tucking into each other. And I know it's a lot to keep in mind when it's easier to just pull out some sort of hack that's like draw a zigzag and then draw some bumps on the sides and you have a braid. And it's not like those tutorials are not right. Those tutorials, I mean, they look good. So there's nothing wrong with following something like that. But if you really want to understand and be able to play with the style of braid and how loose it is and what direction it's going, what direction it's facing, because braids are not always going to be facing straight on. You're not always going to see this center line perfectly. This braid might be facing the other direction, and or even like twisting around itself. And if you don't understand actually what's happening, being able to show that in your art and be able to depict that is going to be tricky. So something else is there are other types of braids that do not follow the same pattern. And so, I mean, this is kind of the very, very basic, easiest to draw braid, easiest to make, to actually make the braid. I used to have really long hair, believe it or not. And so I am very familiar with this type of braid because it was just super easy to manage. This type of braid, but there are other types, and if you want to draw some other types, definitely you're going to need to look at some reference, maybe even some YouTube video tutorials on how to actually braid hair with whatever specific type of braid you are thinking of. That way you can more fully understand what is going on with whatever specific braid you are wanting to draw. As I'm getting lower and lower on the braid, there's typically less and less hair, so the pieces are getting smaller and smaller, but still thinking about coming from the back around to the front and then tucking in. And then probably we can go ahead and just tie this braid off. And this braid is looking a little bit stiff, so I'm going to, after I erase a little bit, I'm going to probably do a little bit of a warp to it to help out. It's a really good, if you have drawn your braid and you then like zoom out and notice, oh my gosh, this braid is like kind of crooked or stiff or whatever, but you don't want to redraw the braid. You can use a liquify or just a mesh warp to adjust. So the way you do that in Clip Studio is edit, transform, mesh transformation. There we are. And then I'm just going to see if we can move this and just make it a little bit more dynamic. Maybe. I can also edit if I made it too thick or too thin. The mesh transform is definitely not perfect. I much prefer Procreate's liquify tool, even Photoshop's liquify tool. Hopefully someday Clip Studio Paint will give us a proper liquify tool. I feel like it's coming. It's gotta be coming soon. Come on, Clip Studio. So now that we have a basic braid, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to cover in the tutorial, is to really hammer in the idea of what the hair is actually doing, wrapping around from behind and then tucking in the front, and each piece of hair overlapping. But let's also talk a little bit about some line art stuff that can help you out. You can also apply this to shading as well, I suppose, and like shadows, but I specifically want to talk about just like your line art or your sketch, and that is because these pieces of hair are overlapping and tucking into each other. When you are doing your line art or your sketch, it's a good idea with your line weight, to add a little bit of darker a little bit of darkening in your lines where the hair is tucking in, so it just really adds to that idea that the hair is going in like behind the other piece of hair, and then making the lines a little bit thinner where it's not tucking in, so these kind of corners can really help add a little bit of like three-dimensionality to it. Do you see how that really just helps make it feel more like the hair pieces are actually tucking into each other? And then of course, adding a little bit of line weight variation to the outside of the braid can help as well. Just line weight in general on the outside of your lines or your drawing can help a lot, you guys. This isn't just braids, this is just line weight in general, adding thicker lines to the outside of your drawings can really help. You can start adding more details, but as you add more details inside the braid, remember to still keep in mind that this hair is tucking into itself. So something that I like to do is I like to add just a little bit of line detail actually coming from the outside like this, and then let it come to the inside. And that just helps reinforce the idea of that motion that's going on with the hair. And no need to go super overboard unless you are trying to do a very hairy texture, like a realistic hair texture. If it's just line art, then you don't have to go too crazy with it. So now I'm wondering if we should try connecting one of these braids to a head. Should we give it a go? Let me speed up the video and show the sketching process of perhaps drawing a character to put one of these braids on. Let's see how it goes. Well, this piece got a little bit away from me, but it is a fun little sketch. I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. I know that it wasn't really your typical hack tips and tricks tutorial. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you guys can hear Mochi, but he is yelling. I'm so sorry about that. But this is how I approach drawing braids. I think it is very important to learn what is actually happening in the braid so that when you do, drawings that are not just like this, where the braid is actually, has some different movement and different angles, or maybe you're doing some sort of like braid crown or any sort of variation, you will have a better foundational knowledge on how the braid actually works, and that will make approaching those kind of non-standard basic braids actually easier because you will have that knowledge, that foundational knowledge. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys so much for your support as always. And the next tutorial coming up, which is the one that is actually planned for this month, will be on teeth and including teeth details to make your characters more interesting while not making them creepy, which is sometimes a challenge, but it's something I really enjoy. So looking forward to that tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.